Hello, everyone, and welcome to Best Practices Preparing Content for Emerging Technology. My name is Linda Marone. I'm Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Data Conversion Laboratory, and I will be your moderator today. For those of you who are not familiar with DCL, we convert and organize content to create electronic documents and ebooks, populate databases, publish on the web, and basically get it ready for tomorrow's technology. DCL services help you refine document conversion strategy, identify document redundancy, extract metadata, and transform legacy and future documents for real needs, both today and in the future. Our co-sponsor today is Vasont Systems. Vasont, headquartered in Pennsylvania, is the developer of the Vasont Component Content Management Software, backed by more than 60 years of experience in the information management and publishing industry. Organizations from a variety of industries, including manufacturing, technology, publishing, and healthcare, use Vasont to manage and produce multilingual technical documentation, product manuals, reference, and training materials. It's with great pleasure that I introduce today's presenter, Bill Burns from Vasont Systems. Bill joined Vasont in 2012 as a Senior Content Analyst after spending 8 years supporting XML component content management efforts at Hewlett-Packard. Prior to that time, he worked as a technical consultant and manager at Lionbridge Technologies and as a regional director at Scriptorium Publishing. Bill has worked for 18 years in the technical communications industry, conducting XML business analysis and training, developing single source processes, and promoting component content management. He has presented at Writers UA, Online Help Europe, regional and international STC conferences, and ACM SIGDoc. Bill is a co-author of the WebWorks Publisher Cookbook, Transforming Your FrameMaker Files to HTML, and Online Help, and a contributing author of Technical Writing 101, a real-world guide to planning and writing technical documentation. With that introduction, Bill, I will turn the webinar over to you.
Thank you very much, Linda. And thank you all for attending today's session. We're going to be discussing how to prepare your document data for emerging technologies. We'll start by discussing the initial planning stages of a data migration process. Then we'll move on to the real focus of this presentation, how to actually prepare your data for migration to emerging technologies, what tasks you need to perform on your data to ensure a smooth, clean transition. Finally, we'll talk about how you can manage the migration process as a whole. Now, this session is supposed to be about emerging technologies, so why am I talking about data migration? Because data migration or transformation is going to be at the heart of all emerging technologies and really has been a driver in technical communications technology for the last 10 years. This session will help you if you are migrating to a new tool set to support greater data reuse, implementing a single source process to reach more channels and delivery systems than you used to support, moving to an XML or structured authoring environment like DITA, or if you are migrating to a component content management system. All these scenarios require you to know what your data looks like, that you control its form and format to a greater degree, and that you know how and when you need to convert it, manipulate it, and repurpose it. So we have a poll that we'd like you to take if you look at your controls there. Are you planning to move to a structured authoring environment in the future? I'll give you just a moment to respond to that.
Okay, we've got about 82% of people who have voted, and it actually looks really interesting. Give you guys a few more seconds.
Very interesting. Well, I think most of you are in the right place. Okay. Planning is key to any good project. A good project plan helps to mitigate those little surprises that happen midway through your process. For a conversion or data migration project, you will need to have the following planning phases: a thorough content analysis, business and architectural analyses, and development of output specifications. You need to perform a thorough content analysis. This step enables you to identify specifically what data you have to convert, what metadata you might need to capture, what reuse opportunities you may have, and what data you might need to normalize before you start your conversion process. This step also allows you to determine if the data in your documentation is even still useful or necessary. You might be surprised at the kinds of artifacts you find buried in your documentation that doesn't really need to be there. Now I'm going to show you some samples of some documentation that we've developed in-house. This is an example of a title page for one of our release documents. And as you notice, I've called out some of the items on this title page just to show how much data on even a simple thing like a title page you can have. So obviously you've got your title, you've got a release number, confidentiality statement right there in the center, company contact information, and trademark information. And I've highlighted only the data, not the auto-generated items like page numbers or anything like that. Notice how the format often, but not always, tells us something about the document data. The document title is treated differently than the release information. The confidentiality statement is set off from the rest of the data with a colored box. Contact and trademark information are present but less prominent. And this is just the title page. Clearly, when you get into your regular document, you'll get even more complex. As you can see, just half a page of material can have many data types that you will need to capture. The most obvious elements are things such as section headings and lists. However, we can get a lot more specific about this data. You notice that the ordered list is actually a task, and we can actually call it out as a task. You might need to distinguish tasks from ordered lists to be a little more precisely in how they're used. The bold items can be user interface elements, and in some cases they may be part of a menu cascade. Some data may be reused in running headers and footers, or even from your front matter. These data types also need to be captured so they can be handled correctly. So what systems will you need to support in the future?
All right, just a couple more seconds. And for anyone who answered other in the exit survey after the webinar, let us know what else it is you're looking to prepare for.
Yeah, clearly you have to know what you're going for. So this is clearly an example of just what you're doing out there, how many different systems you might need to support. A lot of variability there. So you really need to consider your future use options. This is what you need this is why you need to do a business and architectural analysis. The analyses will help you to discern what systems you need to feed, what metadata to capture or add for those systems, and what other emerging technologies you might need to support. These analyses will also help you to determine what systems make sense to support from a business perspective. Publishing to the web is a given these days, but what about knowledge bases? How about learning content management systems or mobile applications? I recall a client once, a while ago, about 10 years ago, who wanted us to look at game systems for delivering stock trading information. Does that make sense from a business perspective? Maybe, maybe not. So be realistic about what will be needed for your future and for your particular market. If you have not determined your future publication tool set, these phases will also help you to prepare for that decision. Finally, in any migration or conversion project, you must know what output targets you will need to support. You need to know what is under the hood, not just what the output is called or what output types tool vendors claim to support. If you have ever compared the HTML markup from AuthorIt, RoboHelp, or Madcap Flare, you probably know what I'm talking about. Help authoring tools, Data Open Toolkit, and DocBook XSL all support various forms of HTML output. Which one does your business need to support? Do you need to support Java-based standards like Oracle Help for Java or Eclipse Help? Do you need to support Section 508 compliance for your PDFs? How about Web Content Management Systems or SCORM compliance? You can see here how the output specifications and the architectural analysis go hand in hand. Each of these preliminary steps influences and affects the others. Also, this helps you determine which legacy deliverables you no longer need to support. If you're no longer printing your guides and only delivering them on PDFs on DVDs, do you really need to have an 8.5 by 5.5 page size? Are those RTF-based WinHelp files still the best option for your online help system? All these decisions you can determine during your output specification phase. These output specs will define precisely what your data needs to look like when it's transformed into deliverables, both in terms of visual layout and the underlying data format. So a migration to a new CCMS system, a new structured authoring environment, or a new tool set requires time for planning and preparation. So while you're doing that task, the writers in your organization should be doing what they can to get ready for the migration. As much as possible and practical, you will want to scrub your data to get it ready to convert cleanly. So to prepare your data, you will need to standardize templates and formatting, train authors to follow internal guidelines for template and style usage, work clean, externalize graphics and isolate reused chapters and text insets, and to clean up your data in general. You need to standardize your templates and your styles, and you will want to be draconian about template control. Implement your templates and control them vigorously. If you need to implement a production editing process to verify compliance, do it. Uniformity and consistency aid in conversions in single source processes. If you have a lot of ad hoc formatting and preferential template adjustments, these will only create headaches down the road. Design your styles based on usage and context, not just on appearance. Use semantic style names as much as possible. For example, bold and emphasis tags tell us absolutely nothing about the data on which they're used. They just give a visual indicator that there's something important about it. Instead, name your styles so that they identify the kind of data to which they're applied. Citation, user interface element, dialogue title, task heading. Semantic styles can be used to prepare your data to be invested with metadata during conversion. Standardized formats for items such as cross-references, page and section numbering, formats, and variable text. The more predictable the formatting is, the easier it will be to convert. Now, sadly, something that many companies neglect is training for their authors on internal standards, particularly in the use of templates. It's not enough just to hire someone who is a tool expert, like a FrameMaker expert or a Madcap Flare expert. In fact, the experts can be more difficult because they know how to tweak the master pages and styles to do what they want. You want to train your writers on the proper use of your template and provide rigorous production editing processes to ensure that people comply to the template usage standards. Also, if you're considering localization, this phase might be a good time to do an internationalization assessment on your documentation and to train writers on proper document internationalization practices. When I say working clean, I simply mean that your writers need to use the template as is, apply styles properly, avoid local formatting and button bar formatting. As you're working through your data scrub, you can eliminate a lot of overrides on paragraph and character styles. If you have tools like FrameScript, they can be used to catch and eliminate overrides and to handle other repetitive formatting tasks. Use the native capabilities of your tools to do batch processing. In both Microsoft Word and Adobe FrameMaker, the Find and Replace feature can be used to reapply styles in batch mode. You can quickly reassign styles in a FrameMaker book, for example, using Find and Replace. Instead of using quick formatting features of tools like Word, use properly defined styles to handle numbered and bulleted lists. These, again, will be easier to convert properly to list items in your target data type. You want to externalize and isolate reused items and items that should be referenced. Graphics should always be referenced. Some conversion tools do not handle embedded graphics gracefully. Reference graphics are also easier to reuse and maintain. Embedded graphics can bloat files and cause data corruption. If you reuse files in multiple books, make sure that you identify and isolate them so they are not converted more than once. For example, if you manage your frame conversion process by the book file, you may wind up converting chapters more than once. If you are working with a conversion vendor like DCL, make sure to communicate with them which files are used in multiple deliverables and only need to be converted one time. If you use text insets, they also need to be isolated to prevent duplicate conversion. Since some conversion tools don't handle embedded files well, you'll need to add placeholders in the documentation to show where the insets are referenced. Now, one of the most difficult parts of your data scrub process is identifying duplicate content. For example, those identical task steps that occur in every software document like click OK or select File New. Manually identifying duplicate content is a mind-numbing task. It takes too much time and people are quite frankly not very good at it. Fortunately, DCL has a tool called the Harmonizer that makes this task much simpler. Now notice this chart here. 60% of this content in this document that was assessed, or a typical document, is redundant content and only 16% new. This harmonizer allows you to identify that content and reuse what can be reused. It also cleans up typographical errors and allows you to increase your document's consistency just by reusing those single elements over and over again. If you're interested in learning more about this tool, you can contact Linda directly. Now, we've also done our own internal testing of systems at Vasont and found that up to 70% of a lot of document data is reused documents. So this is not just a one-time result. This is a very common result across multiple data sets. The real point in this preparation process is to clean up your data and make it as consistent as possible. Consistent patterns make for easy conversion. Inconsistency make conversions more difficult and make single source processes work unreliably. You can use tools like FrameScript or Visual Basic for applications to do some of this cleanup for you. For example, index markers wind up getting sprinkled throughout document data indiscriminately. At the beginning of paragraphs, at the end of paragraphs, in the middle of words. This latter practice of putting index markers in the middle of words is probably the worst for conversions, transforms, and localization processing. You can develop scripts that will move your index markers to the end of your paragraphs. In some cases, you can also add these data cleansing steps to the conversion tools themselves. So look for opportunities to automate as much of the cleanup process as possible. Now, just as an example, I wanted to show you some different cross-reference formats. You notice that I've got the same cross-reference here done 5 different ways, or actually, 5 different ways. You've probably seen examples like this in different documents. And in some cases, you might have seen examples like this in a single document. So for the purpose of conversion or migration, you're going to want to limit the range of variations in such elements, probably to 1 or 2. Again, the more consistent your data is, the easier it will be to develop automated routines to convert it. So poll number 3, are you planning to use internal or external expertise to convert your data or transform style sheets?
All right, a couple more seconds.
Again, very interesting results. As with any project or process, having certain elements in place will help the transition go more smoothly. For migration to a new DTD or a conversion environment, you want to provide an in-house expert in the schema, DTD, or conversion environment that you will be using. You'll want to coordinate your product release schedules with conversion schedules to make sure there aren't any conflicts. And you'll want to target and restrict the data that you'll be converting. Make sure to have an expert on the schema to which your data is being converted or the conversion tool that you're going to be moving to. This person will need to fully understand the proper application of the tags in your target schema or the other routines that are being used in your conversion tool. The results of the content analysis can be used by your expert to develop a mapping report, pairing source styles with your legacy data to the tags that need to be applied in the converted data. Having an expert in-house may be less critical to standards like DITA and DocBook, since conversion vendors often have this kind of expertise in-house. However, you will want to have someone who can identify special cases. For example, if you have data that needs to be marked up semantically, or for conditional use or industry-specific content that might require additional metadata, you'll want to have somebody that can identify that information. Now, this is an example of a simple mapping list using default styles from FrameMaker and mapping them to DITA elements. Notice that in the first 3 cases, there are 2 possible target elements. For heading 1, you could be going to a concept title or a task title, for example. Or for a body paragraph, you could be going to a con body or a task body paragraph. In such cases, the conversion tools may have to be invested with a bit of pattern matching logic to determine if the context should be a task or a concept. FrameMaker actually has some great tools for doing this kind of conversion, and the mapping tables it uses can get quite complex. And I believe that DCL also has some tools that do some very good pattern matching for this kind of mapping. Depending on the size of your documentation team and your company, you will have more or less need for schedule coordination. Obviously, if you only have 3 people on your team in a small company that produces a single product, you'll have much more flexibility on how and when you can choose to convert your documentation. However, with larger teams that have multiple products and varying release schedules, you'll need to make sure that conversion schedules do not conflict with the release schedules. You'll want to try to stagger the migration schedule so that releases precede migration. That will ensure that writers have a break in their development process that will allow for data to be migrated completely. You want to avoid as much as possible converting documentation while it's still being developed. All data for conversion should be locked down until the conversion process is complete. Otherwise, you'll wind up duplicating the conversion process for any unfrozen converted data. Finally, you're going to want to target and restrict data for conversion. Make sure that you identify that information that does not need to be converted. Doing so can help you reduce the cost of your data migration and the time required for the conversion process. You'll want to identify the content that your company needs to maintain and reuse. Exclude all unlikely candidates for reuse. For example, marketing brochures, errata, and other one-off documents likely serve an immediate need and don't have much reuse potential. It may make more sense to archive such items for later use if you need them, instead of converting them. More advanced component content management systems like Vasont often allow you to store unstructured document data along with your structured XML data. If you have design-intensive documents that have little predictability in layout, you might consider maintaining them in their legacy environment instead. Keep in mind that consistency and predictability are beneficial in conversion processes and data. Exceptions are difficult sometimes to plan for. You will also want to assess documents that would be better converted manually or simply used as supporting material for new documents. Some documentation might be left over from the days when your R&D team wrote all the product documentation. It might have combinations of conceptual, task, and reference information rather than typed information as you would desire if you're moving to something like DITA. Now this example is one of which I just sort of spoke about. This is a knowledge base article that I found on a motherboard manufacturer's site. And if you look closely at it, you can see that there's clearly task-based information mixed in here with some conceptual and reference information. And there's no indication that this is a task. There's no steps, no numbering. And in fact, if you look down at the third item there, you might have jumped ahead of the process a little bit because the steps are sort of out of place. So this kind of document really doesn't lend itself for conversion. It's good for supporting material, to provide information for new documents, but you wouldn't want to convert this because you would have to remark it up and revise it anyway. And so that brings us to the end of our presentation. We have some questions that were sent in earlier, and I will try to address those. And if we have any additional questions and additional time, we'll go ahead and take those as well. So the first question was, does the same apply for learning and training content? And I'm assuming that they mean the same rules apply for learning and training content. And I would say yes, these principles can be applied to any kind of document data in which you're going to have reuse. Again, if it's not reusable data, if it's not consistent, if it's not something that you're going to have long-term use for, conversion really doesn't make a lot of sense. Next question is, how do you create specialized DTDs in DITA Open Toolkit? This is really a seminar topic of its own. I would say that your best bet if you are an XML or DITA newbie is to either hire a consultant for such work or seek training. It'll save you a lot of time and frustration. The DITA Open Toolkit can be very confusing even for people who know XML well. So the next question is more of a statement. Word 2010 and XML. I'm guessing that this is a request for information on whether Word 2010 can be used as an XML editor. On its own, I would hesitate to use it, but Quark sells two products that can plug into Word and will provide the necessary functionality to create, edit, and validate XML. If you have an intrepid VB developer in-house, you could also probably develop something that would do the trick as well. By itself, Word just doesn't have the kind of features that you will want to create and validate XML. The next question is about using information mapping and information analysis to classify content. Information mapping can certainly be used with structured authoring environments, particularly with DITA, in which information typing plays an important part. You would probably need custom style sheets to be developed to get the right layout for information mapping, but I wouldn't be surprised if several vendors already have that offering. DITA follows the minimalist approach of John Carroll, which is very similar to information mapping. As far as information analysis goes, I'm not really sure what the term means here. Clearly, you have to perform a content analysis to be able to type your data. That is a critical part of the process. However, there are other ways in which information analysis could be useful. For example, for establishing metadata keywords for your data after the fact, for searching, and for creating navigation taxonomies in order for organizing your content. Please address migrating content from traditional web to mobile platforms. Keep in mind that the real power is in migrating into a non-presentational structured markup in order to allow you the ability to go to any output channel, traditional web, mobile, EPUBs, whatever you like. So having your data tagged in XML markup like DITA will make it easier for you to target mobile devices as well as web content management systems. So the migration path should be to a non-presentational markup from which you can transform to these other delivery formats. DITA Open Toolkit and DocBook XSL both have frameworks to get you about 80% of the way there. You need to invest some time in development work to brand and finish the transforms, though. Next question. Would you recommend having a CCMS, a Component Content Management System, in place before converting to XML or allowing the XML conversion to help drive CCMS? I'm going to use the consultant's equivalent of the Fifth Amendment here to say it depends. Some component content management systems can double as traditional document management systems, so they can be used before and after migration. Vasont is one of those. In that case, you could implement the system, then migrate your data as you need. I think it is more common, though, to migrate to a new structured authoring platform, then implement the component content management system. Most early DITA implementations were done in this fashion, from what I recall hearing. Many use source control systems to store their data instead of component content management. And as these document sets grew more complex, and the CCMS systems became more of a necessity for them. So I think it's more common now to let the XML migration drive the CCMS purchase. Clearly, the reuse and discoverability of data is far greater with a CCMS. And if you need to reuse and repurpose data, if those are primary drivers for you, then a component content management system just makes more sense than any other solution. Next question. Where do you start in the preparation of content? And do you need different software depending on using Kindle or Nook? As with the question on traditional web and mobile devices, data preparation should focus on getting into a non-presentational format like DITA or DocBook. The open source transform tools can help you get to those various EPUB formats. I do not recommend buying software to actually develop and edit Kindle or Nook content directly. That would be what my favorite television chef Alton Brown calls a unitasker. Use tools that can deliver to multiple output formats, including ebook or EPUB. I recommend XML-based solutions since these do not lock you into a proprietary editing tool. Is there a litmus test for determining when study material format versus layered into the help system, particularly for those lone writers who have to do it themselves? So I wasn't quite sure if I understood the question correctly, but the content analysis can help you to determine whether or not some of the material you have can be conditionalized for study materials or study formats versus task-based information, immediate need-to-know information for help systems. So a methodology like information mapping or minimalism could help you in this process. And those are all the preliminary questions I have. Do we have time for any additional?
We do, Bill, and actually we have quite a few questions. So I'll just get started, and we'll go from there and see how many we can answer. Just as an FYI for our audience, we will make certain that all questions are answered and will be posted on the both our website and Vasont's website within a short period of time. I won't commit, Bill, to this afternoon. At any rate, Bill, Laura has a multi-pronged question. Are there any industry tools or metrics for estimating how much time is required for data conversions migration projects?
Yeah, that one varies quite a bit on the complexity of your data and the size of your document set. I'm not sure if I would be able to answer more specifically than that. Maybe is that a question that you might have an answer to, Linda?
Well, potentially, and you are correct. It certainly is going to be dependent upon what type of document set is being converted. Rather than the tools, I think that, certainly here at DCL, we do use automation for the majority of the project, but even with tools as good as ours, they only will get you about 90–95% of the way there. So you have to allot the time and requirements really for the manual part of it as well, and that's where expertise comes into place. So aside from the factor considering the document sets, you also have to consider the expertise that you or your team may have in place. I guess the second part of that question we probably already answered, or a breakdown by percentage of each major aspect of the project. Again, very, very dependent upon the data set itself. We spend a considerable amount of time on the front end, really preparing the data, preparing specs, making sure we have multiple checkpoints, back and forth until everything is tweaked as we need it to, so that the automation can run fairly free from that point forward. So again, highly dependent, and Laura, I'd be happy to give you more information if we had a sample, might be able to work with you on that one. The next question from John. The poll number 3 did not allow for a true answer. I do not know if we are going to be able to engage external help or not. I'm not quite sure what you are asking there. Maybe we can come back to that one, Bill, at a later time.
Yeah,
we've had time to.
I think that he was just commenting that he would like to say.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Peggy had asked about what about emerging technologies, mobile, iPad apps. Do you have any advice for her on those technologies?
As with any target output platform, you're going to want to have somebody who really understands the data requirements for that output. So you're going to want somebody who knows Android or knows iPhone data requirements very clearly, and who can identify the kind of metadata that you're going to need for the output target.
Okay. Abraham asked, based on your experience, what are the best tools you recommend for authoring in DITA?
I personally don't have a preference. I use Oxygen a lot now. Oxygen Editor or Author both handle DITA very well. But Arbortext Editor also has a DITA implementation in their latest version. And, of course, XMetal has been doing DITA since almost the introduction of the industry standard itself. A lot of tool vendors support it because it is the hot thing now. So I think that you've got a lot of options out there. FrameMaker also has a DITA application, structured application that works very well. I find that it sort of locks you into more of a book mold, which might not be the best thing for encouraging topic-based and task-based content development, but they're all capable tools.
Okay. Ron has asked, just see. Never mind. That has to do with the poll question. Aubrey would like to know, are there tools to convert large 600-page documents into a structured or DITA format so it isn't manually converted? If you want to make some comments, Bill, on that one, I can add some too as well.
Right. Obviously, there are tools. It depends on what your current formats are. FrameMaker, of course, has tools that will do that very well. I mentioned the mapping tables. DCL has tools that will do that very well. In terms of off-the-shelf products, that one I couldn't really speak to as much for things like Word, but FrameMaker definitely has some good tools for doing that sort of thing.
Yes, I would say, though, too, just be very wary because no automation, no tool is going to get you 100% of the way there through the conversion. And, you know, so believing that it might could lead you astray. It definitely does take expertise and, you know, a certain amount of manual intervention, if you will.
Hey, Linda, can I go back to that one question about
Sure.
the third poll? I would like to respond to that because I think he pointed something out very good, and I need to address it. So,
sure.
The reason I found that response interesting is that there were a lot of internal people that were saying we're going to take this in-house. Some that would be saying we're going to do all of it outside, and a lot of we'll do some of it in-house and some of it outside. And I found that that is really the most common approach because you're going to have a lot of people who inside want to get their hands into the tools and really understand it, and that's really the best way to learn your new structured environment is to really hack away at it for a while. But obviously, you're going to get into some trouble if you do not rely on any outside expertise because there are a lot of good consultants out there. So I do find that number 3 seems to be a very common solution, very common choice for organizations.
Terrific. Abraham has a good question. What is a based price for converting documents, Word and FrameMaker using DCL services? I love that question. And what is the business model? I will tell you all that there is no such thing as a rate card when it comes to conversion services. And here at DCL, we spend a considerable amount of time analyzing the data set prior to even discussing any pricing whatsoever. So again, as you are out there seeking expert advice, through consultants or otherwise, please be very wary of cookie cutter pricing. It's later when you don't have the right analysis done up front and the right process in place that you end up with a lot of surprises happening during the conversion that end up being more costly than anything you could have ever imagined. So be very, very careful. Julia has asked Bill, can you recommend a good, easy-to-use XML editor that supports a DocBook DTD?
I would probably go with Oxygen on that one. Oxygen supports DocBook very well. All of them do. That's such a common DTD that it's been in use for a long time, so all of the major vendors support DocBook, but I really do like Oxygen and ArborText editor as well.
Okay, and Aubrey has one more question. How do you convert current unstructured technical writers to structured authors and XML champions? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's $1 million question.
I know.
I've heard it described in the past that the biggest difficulty in a data migration, in migration into structured authoring, is not the software or the hardware, but the wetware, and that's because human beings are, 80–90% water. Culture and comfort have a lot to do with the success of migration to structured authoring and component content management. And that's because you're moving to a very different beast. And so what I find very helpful is to find some of those people, perhaps even the most vocal, not necessarily opponents, but those who are most critical of the implementation, find ways to get them involved and get them to become your champions, because often the ones who are the most critical are the ones who can see what could cause problems down the road. And if you can get them to work with you on something and even become owners of the migration, they can convert the other people. So really, I think you want to know your writing team, Know the people who have the kind of expertise that will be able to learn things quickly, to identify problems, and to propose solutions. Obviously, if they can only identify problems and not propose solutions, they're not going to be much help. But if you have people that can identify problems and propose solutions and who have the technical expertise to pick up these tools quickly, those are going to be your best champions, and they can convert and train your other people.
Yeah, great answer. And I will say, too, that we've actually conducted some studies over the years, and one of the #1 issues identified in converting to DITA and even just looking at legacy conversions has been getting past the perception. So it is really educating people and helping them to understand that while a change is about to occur, the change is going to make everyone's lives a lot easier moving forward. And in today's world of ever-changing technology, it's almost impossible to stay the same. No organization can do that. It's about really supporting end users and getting this data ready for a myriad of devices and applications, and it's really tough to stand still in today's world. So we feel your pain, Pamela, for sure. Or Aubrey, I'm sorry. Pamela has one question that we might want to answer also. Most companies require budget approval prior to purchasing services. I'll let Bill speak for Vasont on this, but how does DCL deal with this scenario? I wouldn't be able to discuss conversion or tools, obviously, without having a ballpark figure approved in the budget. It's a catch-22, and it most definitely is. We work with this all the time. But once we've had a chance to really look at even just a representation of the documentation and understanding that there are quite a few issues that could affect the overall pricing once it comes down to the project itself, we can develop a ROM which at least can get past the budgeting side of things. Bill, you might want to address this for those who have the same issue when they're looking at various tools and systems. How do you guys generally work with clients in developing at least a budgetary figure for them?
Well, I'll give you two answers. One from my consultant, my previous consultancy experience, and then one from the experience I've had with the short time I've been at Vasont. That content analysis and that architectural analysis are going to be critical at defining your needs. And so once you have that part out of the way, you will be able to define your requirements and determine exactly what your system is going to need. Typically speaking, the content analysis takes a good 3 or 4 days of solid work with a group to do that, and so obviously you have a consultant to be helping you with that, and same thing with the architectural analysis. And then after that point, that person is going to go away and draw up a spec. So basically, you're going to know ahead of time before you even look at the system what your needs are going to be, and then that consultant can give you a price based on that. For Vasont, we have some base pricing, but all of it depends upon the requirements that you put on the table, because the system is very configurable. So if you go with the software as a service, obviously you get a little you get something a little more quickly, and you can target pricing a bit more. But for the most part, you're going to know what you're getting, and you're going to have a price on the table before the work even starts, because companies, like Vasont, they have to make a living too. So they have to be able to tell you, this is what we'll do, and this is what we want to get paid for.
I think it's important too, when you're evaluating any solution, albeit a service or a tool or system, that you really need to look at all of the cost-saving factors as much as you do the expense of implementation or conversion or whatever it happens to be. Because ultimately, many of these tools, many of these services I know are, in the case of the expertise that we bring to the team, overall we're saving a ton of money that's already being spent elsewhere. So you really want to have a good evaluation done ahead of time, as well as getting an idea of what these other services might, what type of investment might be included. So just as an FYI, look at the big picture, not just at all the cost components. So Bill, I believe that about does it for today's session. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I hope that you have found the session to be valuable. I know I did. So we look forward to having you attend future webinars. And thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.